How's it going, everybody? This is Cameron White with White Light Astrology, and welcome back to your favorite weekly horoscope. What the fuck is going on in the universe for May 13th through May 20th of 2019. Thank you guys so much for being here and liking and sharing and commenting and subscribing. I love and appreciate every single one of you, and I'm so glad you guys can be here this week because I wasn't last week, and I super apologize for that. I've been sick, and I'm actually still sick. That's why I didn't feel like putting up the uplights that I usually do and everything like that. And I'm going to be a little low energy today on this video. Yeah, I'm still sick, and I look like crap, so we're just going to get through it. But this week, we've got three pretty big things that are going on that, are definitely going to play out for the next couple of weeks. And one of them is going to be Venus is going to enter Taurus. And while Venus is entering Taurus this week, she's also going to conjoin Uranus, and this is going to be a pretty big deal once we get to the full moon in Scorpio this weekend, which before we get to that, we also have Mars entering Cancer this week, which is another really big deal because as Mars goes into Cancer, it's going to eventually go on the North Node. It's eventually going to oppose Saturn, oppose Pluto. This is the sign of fall for Mars, meaning Mars doesn't operate that well here. And I know we talked a lot about that in my monthly horoscope, so this is a pretty big deal as well. And then, of course, we have that full moon in Scorpio, which is kind of highlighting all of this stuff. And it's kind of like, Venus is going to be on top of Uranus right on that day, too. So I think this is going to be a really intense lunation that we have. And then, of course, next week chills out, but this week is definitely going to be a pretty big, role as far as we go into the summer, as we go into the eclipses. So with that being said, let's go ahead and jump into the horoscope. Starting today on Monday, May 13th, we're going to have the moon in Virgo. It is going to be opposing Neptune and Jupiter, and this isn't really the biggest deal, but, as the moon's in Virgo, this is going to be, while the moon's in Virgo, it's a really good time to, really focus on your details, pay attention to the details, cross your T's, dot your I's. While the moon's opposing Neptune, this is a good time to really look at the details that can be over blurred, that can be hard to really define. That's Neptune creating that fog. As well, later on, the moon is going to both square Jupiter and Mars. And while Mars is still in Gemini, before it enters Cancer, this is, again, what paths are we looking at? What are we trying to keep our mental energy attentive to? How can we better match, our actions more along with our mindset and our words? And as the moon's starting to square Mars in Gemini, this is definitely a time of okay, if I want to take down these two paths, if this is where I want to direct my energy, how better do I direct that energy? And while the moon's squaring Jupiter, of course, this is trying to live a big dream and have a big sense of idealism, but being able to fit it into a box. So you may have some problems, seeing all the details and trying to see how it's all going to play out. The moon in Virgo can be really stressed since it's making opposition to Neptune, square to Jupiter, square to Mars. That's a lot going on. So on Monday, as you can kind of start to think more mercurially about things, getting more into detail, don't overwhelm yourself, and be open-minded about what the outcome can look like. Then, of course, as we go into Tuesday on May 14th, the moon's going to enter Libra, and that's kind of about it. It's not really going to make an aspect until Wednesday. However, as the moon kind of goes into Libra, this is Libra. This is about delegating. This is about working with. This is about, working with other people, working with other energy. This is about, kind of I like using the word delegating because it's about balancing what's going to work where, who can do this job best, why should they do this job, X, Y, and Z. But as the moon goes into Libra, this is kind of like a time to reflect, chill out maybe a little bit. But then, of course, things will get more intense as we go later on in the week. But Tuesday seems pretty nice and chill so far. And then as we go into Wednesday, May 15th, we're going to have Venus enter Taurus. And this is really important because we're talking about the planet of love, beauty, luxury, money. She's a very positive planet, and she's going into her favorite sign, her home sign of Taurus. And this is, of course, really positive. As we have Venus going into Taurus, Venus in Aries, where the planet of value and, she wants to bring things together. She wants to connect people. She wants to connect objects. She wants to, treasure value and enjoy and splurge. As she's going from Aries, the sign of wanting to initiate it, wanting to go for it, and going into the sign of Taurus where she's more receptive of it, more grounding of it, more fertile in that energy, this is going to be a lot more positive where you're starting to see a little bit more of your value, a little bit more of your attention come to more physical, tangible, realistic things that can actually give you some security and groundedness versus Venus in Aries just wants to just go for it. Venus in Taurus is but what's really worth it in the long run? What's really going to last? And then also on Wednesday, we're going to have the moon squaring Saturn. And as the moon's also in Libra, I think this is important because this is a Venus-ruled sign as well. And as the moon's in Libra and it's kind of figuring out, what do I value, what is more important, and as it squares Saturn, this can be a little bit more rough where Saturn in Capricorn is saying, you do need to consolidate, you do need to conserve, but you need to have your needs met. So the moon in Libra is kind of like, do I want to buy the nice expensive shampoo or do I need to save $1 or $2 and buy something that's a little bit not brand, but it's still just as good? And then on Thursday, May 16th, that's when we're going to have Mars enter Cancer. And this is really important. I kind of want to talk about this for a minute. Mars, the planet of, separation, of cutting. He's frustrating, but he's also a lot of our energy. Like, how are we really directing our energy? What makes us go? Now, Mars is usually always wanting to go, always wanting to charge forward, very much not afraid to peel the Band-Aid off. Now, when Mars enters Cancer, it's in its sign of fall, and to get a better understanding of that, the sign opposite of Mars's fall is Capricorn, which is Mars's exaltation. Mars, this planet of action and energy, finds exaltation in the sign of Capricorn. It's able to do things. It's very much like, I can work an 80-hour work week and I'm totally fine. Like, while Mars is an Aries and a Scorpio ruled sign that are more action and more Mars driven, they're more martial type characteristics. Mars in Capricorn is very much like, I can sustain that and I can keep that energy. Mars in Cancer, though, in fall is where Mars is kind of struggling to really decide. Mars is struggling to initiate. Mars is struggling to, attack. Mars is in Cancer, and the sign of Cancer, rules the stomach or the breast on the body. It's all about our emotions, about where we need to be vulnerable, where we need to protect ourselves, what matters the most, rules by the moon, which is symbolizing of the mother, and all of that type of feminine quality stuff that you always read about the sign of Cancer. Mars going into the sign of Cancer, it's like if we're not directing our energy into the things that matter the most, the things that are necessary, the things that we need to do, we're not going to have the energy to do it. And I want to say that because while Mars is in Cancer, it's going to be like, man, I don't have the energy to do this. And it's going to be because you either don't need to, or you're going to want to protect yourself from that type of stuff, or you want to just unless it's what you need, unless it's going to nurture you, don't take action on it because you're really not going to have the energy for it anyway. While Mars is in Cancer, it is going to be a little bit easier to be defensive, to be a lot more harsh and spit back. But I want you guys to just be more aware of, as you're taking, day by day, making, progressive steps forward, only take action and really put your energy into the things that matter most and to protecting those things and not letting yourself become vulnerable in ways that you can be attacked. Because that is the reality of Mars in Cancer. I'm not saying people are out here to attack you or anything like that, but it's just more of at this time, don't waste your time on anything that's not important. You need to focus on what's going to take care of you, what's going to be more important for you, and what's going to get you where you need to go. And you need to protect that. And that's why I wanted to hit on that. But also on Thursday, we're going to have the moon enter Scorpio right before we have this full moon in Scorpio. It is going to oppose Venus. It is going to oppose Uranus. So this is going to be, we're talking about the moon, one of the luminaries. It's almost full, and it's in the sign of Scorpio, which is about hidden things, dark things, about things dying. And so as the moon goes into Scorpio, I think this is about, after we got back from the moon in Libra, what are we delegating? What's more important? This full moon in Scorpio is like, what do we need to let go of now? What do we need to, what no longer serves us and what is dying? What's dead? What do we need to not have on us anymore? We can't bear that weight. Again, Mars in Cancer, it's like we can only take action and bring the things that we need. This moon in Scorpio is kind of like, well, what do we need to let go of? And also on Thursday, we're going to have Mercury trine Saturn. And I think this is going to be pretty positive and pretty constructive for the most part. Maybe not so much positive. But as Mercury's in Taurus, and it's like, yes, this is what matters, this is what's tangible, this is what's real, this is where I can ground myself on. As it starts to trine Saturn, and Saturn's like, yes, this is going to support you moving forward. This is going to, help you grow into what you're really kind of not necessarily trying to grow into, but Mercury in Taurus is like, this is what I'm thinking about, this is where my mind's headed, and it's staying this way. Saturn's giving you some constructive criticism and also some help and a lending hand to kind of go, hey, Mercury, if this is, if I was you, this is how I would do things. And Saturn and Capricorn's kind of giving some wisdom to Mercury and Taurus. So that is pretty positive and pretty constructive. And then as we go into Friday, May 18th, that's when we're going to have the moon later on oppose Mercury, and it is going to eventually oppose the sun, but it will be trining Neptune as well. And on Friday, we're just still kind of getting ready for the full moon in Scorpio. It's not going to be exact on Friday yet, but the feeling of the moon being in Scorpio of like, hey, what doesn't serve us anymore, and what are we holding on to that can bear a weight, that can bring us down, and what do we need to let go of? This is a full moon. This is lighting up an axis. And while the sun's in Taurus of like, this is what's valuable, the moon's going to be in Scorpio of, this is no longer, I no longer need to hold on to this. This doesn't need to bring me down as much as I want it to. And as we move into this weekend on Saturday and Sunday, on Saturdays when we have the full moon in Scorpio. And we also have Venus conjoining Uranus on Saturday as well. And this is pretty important because while we have this full moon in Scorpio and it's highlighting and bringing up the things that are like, what's dying, what's decaying, what no longer serves and what matters. Like the moon in Scorpio, it's getting direct to the point. It's getting clear on the emotional, reality of like, this is how I feel about things and I can't contain that anymore. It's going to be it's a moon in Scorpio. It's not necessarily like, oh, joyous time, but it is going to be pretty intense. And I think the big part of this is like, while Venus is conjoining Uranus, which is another big deal, this is like Uranus in the sign of Taurus and the sign of Venus. While Venus is in her home sign, this is the first conjunction. This is like, hey, we've got to really understand what value looks like to us in a new definition. Like redefining what value looks like, redefining what you want to possess, what you want to hold, what you want to bring to yourself. And this full moon in Scorpio is kind of like, I really like that. This is something new. This is something that's sparking, my interest. This is something that I want to bring on. What do you got to let go in order to get that? And this all comes back down to that Mars in Cancer, what matters the most right now. And this Venus and Taurus conjoining Uranus, this is kind of like, hey, there's a lot of good stuff being presented to you that you can easily make this choice down and take on these, take on this new, whatever it is, lifestyle or, whatever thing it is that you want to take on. There's this new great thing. But this full moon in Scorpio is like the attachment that you can have to the things that you have to let go of in order to get those things can be a little bit rough, and it's just a process of letting go. But I did just do a whole video about that on my Think Big Thursdays, so if you want to figure out how to let your shit go, make sure you watch that. But then later on Saturday, we'll have the moon go into Sagittarius, and this is a lot more rewarding because later on Sunday as well, while the moon's in Sagittarius, it's going to be squaring Neptune. And I think this weekend after this full moon in Scorpio is done and the moon's in Sagittarius, it's like, all right, where do we go from here? What does moving forward look like? Is it going to be positive? Is it going to be freeing? What do we want to expand ourselves into? What narrative, what story has Jupiter been helping you write in your head with your beliefs and with your idealism? And as the moon goes into Sagittarius, it's like, well, it's time to bring that into play. It's time to bring that into picture. And I think that's going to be positive, especially on Sunday as it squares Neptune. It's going to be kind of like, this looks a little bit weird. But as we go into Monday and next week, by the time we're doing this video again, that's when the moon's going to be conjoining Jupiter. And I think this is going to be a pretty positive note on leaving the full moon in Scorpio and kind of just going, hey, I left this shit behind and I'm starting to actually put in furniture in the space that Jupiter has given you. And so, yeah, that's basically this week. And then next week we have Gemini season beginning. Mercury's going to enter Gemini and go Cazimi the same day as the sun. So that's going to be super positive as well. Mars is going to sextile Uranus, and then it's Norwalk. I hope to see you guys at the Northwest Astrological Conference in Seattle. I haven't said anything about it. And if you're still watching this, you might have heard of it. You might have not. But if you're going to be at Norwalk, let me know. I'm going to be at Norwalk too. So I hope to see you there. Yeah, and that's this week, guys. So with that being said, thank you guys so much for being here and liking and sharing and commenting and subscribing. I love and appreciate every single one of you, and I'll be seeing you next week.